Hello, welcome to another episode of AEA Insight. My name is Sandra Amakwe and I'm your host for this episode. Today, we'll be discussing electricity loss reduction, and my guest for today is Engineer Jabesh Amissah-Arthur. He's going to take us through what's the meaning of electricity loss reduction is and what's all about it. Welcome, Mr. Jabesh Amissah-Arthur. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
We're always happy to have you on the show.
And I'm happy to be here with you.
Okay, so let's delve in. What's electricity loss reduction? When you say, what does it mean?
What it is that in the production and delivery of electricity to the user,
Okay.
there's always some of the power that is lost.
Okay.
Now, what happens is that the proportion of the power that is lost sometimes gets a little too much, and in some cases, it's way too much.
Okay.
And that is essentially lost revenue. And so an utility that wants to be efficient needs to look at what is causing those losses to be excessive and then deal with them.
When do we actually say it's excessive? It's normal when there's a loss of
Typically,
electricity?
one will expect losses in the neighborhood of 8 to 10%.
Okay.
Maximum 15% is then there's not too much worry. But beyond that, then there's clearly something wrong.
But what actually accumulates for this loss reduction? What makes
that is what many of the utilities have to address. I mean, they typically talk about technical loss, which is what is actually being lost in the equipment and so on. And then they talk about commercial loss. What is lost in terms of actual theft by consumers, what is lost by way of the utilities shortfalls in terms of metering, in terms of billing, in terms of customer identification, and so on. So all of those are termed commercial loss, distinct from technical loss, which is what the equipment actually consume themselves as they are delivering power to the customer.
So let's understand, in the chain of electricity generation, transmitting, and distribution, where does the loss happen?
The loss, the technical loss, for instance, happens throughout.
Okay.
It happens throughout. Every time you are moving electrons from one point to another, you are going to get some loss. So in the generation system, we don't talk about loss very much because the power is measured after it is produced and it is given to the transmission. The transmission loss typically on the average is 4% or less.
Okay.
4%. That is what typically it is for transmission. Then you get to distribution. And why everybody talks about distribution is that's where sometimes we see the biggest loss. Because understand that in transmission, the voltages are so high that it's impossible for an individual like you or I to connect and steal it. We can't, because the voltages that we are talking about beyond 34,000 volts, and you can't go and play with that. So they don't have the problem of commercial loss. It's when you get to the distribution and they reduce it to the home voltage that then it becomes possible for individuals to connect and to try various things to steal. And then there are all the other things that happen. Customers who are connected, but they are not in the database for billing, meters that are not working properly, and so on and so forth. All these other commercial losses come into play at the distribution end. And that's when you see losses going up to 20%, 27%, 30%. In some cases, 40% of the energy is lost. And the understanding why it is a concern is that everybody knows that when you are losing 40% of what you are supposed to be distributing, there's no way you can remain commercially viable.
Okay.
And that's why that is such a concern.
Why are you not able to remain commercially viable?
Supposing you were distributing beer, and when they give you 100 cartons, you lose 40 of them, and you are able to account for 60 only. How are you going to make a profit? That is a big problem.
So who bears the effect? Is it ECG or is it IPPs? Who is bearing the effect of the loss?
Well, the loss, if you were structured properly, should be the responsibility of the distribution utility, because it's on record that you were given 100 units to distribute, and you are able to find where only 60 has gone to bill for 60. And you should improve your game in order to account for what is left. And so typically it will be, if according to, let's say, for the PURC standards, if they were able to account for 85% of it, it would be considered good and average performance. If you were able to account for 92%, then you are optimum. So that is what it is. And it has to be essentially the distribution utilities improving its game to be able to account for what it has been given to distribute.
Let's bring the conversation home. So in Ghana, do we know the percentage for the loss?
Yes.
What's the percentage currently?
Percentage, if you take ECG overall, I think that in 2024, they were talking about 27 to 30%. That's where they are. There are places that are far worse, and there are places that are far better. There are some zones in NEDCO, for instance, that are seeing losses around 12 and 15%, but there are also places that are seeing losses 40% and above.
Wow.
And so it varies. It varies. And one of the challenges is allowing or ensuring that when a region or when a zone has been given a certain amount of energy, they are held to account for that, which I think is one of the weaknesses of the management system for the distribution utilities at the moment. That the energy that is given to a region to distribute, they are not held accountable for what they lose. And I think that the solution lies in beginning to get that done.
So you mentioned solution, and that's where I was coming to. What will be the solution in addressing these losses?
That I like the analogy of a beer distributor.
Okay.
Because it's the same distribution business.
Okay.
So if you were a beer distributor, you'll know how much you gave to your agent at Central Region.
Okay.
You know how much you gave to your agent in the Western Region. If you gave him 60 cartons, you'll expect him to account for 60. Maybe he will say 2 bottles got broken, but there's a certain level of expectation that he will account for it. And if he's unable to account for it, what should happen to him? That is what the system has to do. That we know for each region how much power, how much energy they were given in this month. And when they bill at the end of the month, how much have they been able to bill for and account for? What they have not been able to account for, what you do to that manager. And that is what we should figure out and make structures to incentivize him to make sure that his losses are at minimum.
Are the prepaid meters that we have in the system not addressing those losses?
The prepaid meters are addressing one part of the problem.
Okay.
They address the collection problem.
Okay.
Because then what you are doing is, if the prepaid meter is working properly, let's assume that the prepaid meter is working properly, then that individual is paying for the power even before he consumes it. So you don't have a collection backlog.
Okay.
Which is what you have with the traditional postpaid meters. So the prepaid meters clearly address a collection problem. So you don't have a collection problem. But that prepaid meter has to work well.
Okay.
And then you also have to make sure that that prepaid meter is not being bypassed and is not being manipulated. So those are the other parts of the problem.
So it's the manipulation of the prepaid meters that is causing some of the losses that we are seeing.
That's also part of the problem. That the utilities have to make sure that the prepaid meters are working properly and that they are not being bypassed. Because once they get bypassed, or once somebody gets manipulates it such that it is not recording correctly what it should record, then it's a loss that is coming up.
If we look at other countries, what are they doing better of that makes them stand out or makes their system better off than what we are having here?
Some of the Francophone countries have a harsher regime
Oh, okay.
for collection and dealing with non-payment. So what I know is that they have more stringent and punitive arrangements for that. So they prevent, and their society, some of them don't tend to tolerate
Okay.
power theft very, very much. But then the data indicates that most of sub-Saharan Africa, and especially West Africa, each of the countries has a challenge with distribution loss.
And that's why we have the utility courts to deal with issues that has to do with thefts of electricity.
Yes, but the end result is what we are looking at. Has that been able to deal with the question, with the challenge? And that is what we have. If it hasn't, then there's still more work to be done. And the fact is that as at 2024, there's so much more work to be done in terms of losses.
Well, you have been in the power sector for so long, and looking at the system currently, have we made some improvement from the time we started generating electricity till now? Has there been, or we still have a bigger problem to deal with as of now?
I think that there has been a change in the structure of the sector, such that the distribution losses are becoming more prominent. If you look at the network of Ghana from 1960 till about 1990, what you see is that the power that was generated, the bulk was going to industry, and especially two specific industries, going to Valco and then going to exports. Now, with those two, the losses were almost nil. And so when 60-70% of the power that was generated in the country was going to these places, there was only 30% that was going into distribution. And so if you lose even 30% of 30%, then that is 9% loss.
Yeah.
So from the 1960s, when bulk generation of electricity started, up to 1990, thereabout, distribution losses wasn't such a big concern because it probably contributed only 9% of the total amount generated. But since then, the tables have turned.
Okay.
Valco has gone down substantially, and domestic consumption has risen sharply, such that now if you are 30% of what is being produced is being lost, then you have a big problem. So that is part of why distribution loss now is such a big factor in the conversation on the power
Then
sector.
it looks like the more people we get connected to electricity, it looks like then we are going to have more losses in the system.
It's not just the people. The more power that gets consumed in the distribution business, it seems that the worse the problem gets. And that's why it's crucial that the distribution utilities find a way, or the sector as a whole finds a way to address this loss.
Do you ever see a headway with this?
I see significant headway coming. It requires a lot more work. Some investigations that have been done have indicated where the problems would tend to lie. But they are not going to be easy to address, but they have to be addressed. And if they are addressed, I have no doubt that the problem will be brought to book.
Do you think that they are, like you mentioned, with other countries, there are very punitive measures that they are utilizing to be able to reduce the losses? Would you advise we actually implement such punitive measures?
I think that, yes, if you don't have sufficiently punitive measures, and let's take the extreme case. Suppose there's no penalty for when you get caught stealing, then everybody will try it. If you get caught, okay, tough luck, you got caught. But then there's no. So as a deterrent to power theft and to losses, there has to be a punitive regime. But then there's a lot more work to be done by the utilities themselves, because the data suggests that there is a lot of consumption that is going on without the utilities themselves billing. There are customers who have been registered and can show you their account number, but their account number is not in the billing database.
Okay.
So they are not being billed.
Yeah.
That is work that the utilities themselves have to do. It's nobody else. And I guess if we had registered you, we had given you an account number, but for 1 year you are not receiving bills, you would continue consuming. But it's the utility that has to solve that problem. There are people who are in the billing database, but they are not receiving bills.
Okay.
And the data we have looked at suggests that there are people who have been consuming power for a whole year and they haven't received 1 kilowatt hour bill.
Wow.
And that is also work for the utilities to remedy. How come this person is in your database and is not being billed for kilowatt hours? And so those are things that there's quite a bit of it that we believe the utilities can do to solve the problem.
So the problem is not just coming from the consumers, but we have the utilities as well who are also contributing to the loss.
Yes.
Then from what you're saying, it looks like we should go in more for the prepaid meters than the postpaid meters.
No, the prepaid meters also they don't solve all the problems. I've told you, they solve the collection problem. But if somebody is stealing, prepaid meter doesn't solve that problem.
Why so?
Because he's stealing. He's connected directly to the network.
Okay.
And he's taking power off the pole without the meter. So prepaid meter doesn't solve the problem. That doesn't solve that kind of problem, although it solves a collection problem. So I think that part of the challenge has been that some of the managers of the utilities and have viewed prepaid meter as a solution to everything, but it is not. It solves a collection problem, yes, for those who are connected through that, but it doesn't solve the problem of there are prepaid meters that have been connected that are in the database, but they are not being built. They are not receiving, they are not purchasing electricity for 1 year.
So how do we resolve this?
That's what I'm saying. Some of these shortfalls are coming directly from the utilities management of their billing system. And that has to be looked at. I believe that is a big contributor to the high losses we are getting.
So I'm not making a case for those who are into electricity theft, but do you think that the prices of electricity is the cost of consumers going into theft? Or you think that it's the availability of the electricity that the people want?
I think that those who have a habit of stealing, it becomes second nature, and it's not so much the cost of it. I admit, I think that many actors in the power sector admit that our utility tariffs are competitively not the best with the sub-region. But I don't think that is an excuse for stealing, and probably it is more of nature, of human nature. People want to get away with. Some people want to get away with something that they can pay for, that you have used and that has to be provided. They want to get away. So yes, I wouldn't dispute that the power tariffs are probably a little higher than many people will expect, but I wouldn't attribute the loss and the stealing to that.
So with the laws, who bears much of its impact in the power sector?
I think that the whole power sector suffers, because then what happens is that the revenue that is generated at the end of from the customer is unable to meet the demands, or the people who have contributed to it. The payments don't go forward, and then it contributes to the debt that the sector is facing. So like, if the money is not enough, and then you take away what you need to pay your staff, and so on and so on, then you end up at the beginning of the chain, which is the fuel, unable to pay for the fuel.
Yeah.
And when that happens, quite often what is happening in Ghana is that now the government has to find money to pay, or to subsidize the fuel, so that generation can continue. And the real challenge of it is that, for how long can the government continue subsidizing the power sector?
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that the power sector has come to this position, because for many years, for probably until about 2000, the year 2000, the power sector was self-sufficient.
Yeah.
It was self-sufficient, the tariffs were able to cover, and everything was going on. There are two changes that happened around the year 2000 that has contributed to this. First of all was that our lowest cost generator, which is Akosombo, became insufficient, and we started buying fuel, petroleum, to produce energy. So the cost went up multiples. That's the first thing. And around that same time, the change that I was talking about happened, that the exports and VALCO were reduced to almost nothing, and the domestic consumption took the bulk of it. And so losses became a big issue for the power sector. So those are two forces that came together around the same time, around the year 20,000, meant that the power sector, which had been self-sufficient for several years, probably 40 years or 30, 40 years, suddenly found itself in a problem, and it has been a continuous problem since the year 2000. But it is clear that no government has a deep enough pocket to subsidize the power sector. The amount of money we are talking about, no government has the money to do that. And it has to stop at some point. And the sector has to become self-sufficient, such that they are not depending on government to provide the subsidy. And we have to figure a way to do that as a sector if we want to go forward.
If you're looking at any percentage that is realistic, what percentage will you look at for electricity loss reduction?
The percentage reduction, I think that when you are talking about 30% losses, we need to cut that by at least half.
So we're looking at 15?
Yes. And I think that is doable. From the numbers I've seen, that is doable. And probably we will get it down to 12% to 10%. I am expecting that we should be able to do that.
And you think that will show up our revenue in the sector?
That is directly additional revenue without even increasing any costs.
Your final words to our audience, engineer?
Well, I think that we owe ourselves as Ghanaians the responsibility to make sure that our power sector is vibrant and is financially healthy, such that it can continue to expand what it does and improve what it does for the satisfaction of all our demands.
Thank you so much for joining us and giving us much education on this topic.
Okay.
Thank you all for joining us for this episode. We see you in our next episode. It's bye for now.